The Otto Link New York Tone Master, favoured by musicians such as Coleman Hawkins, Ben Webster, Hank Mobley, Jimmy Heath, and, perhaps most famously, our patron saint John Coltrane. It was the go-to mouthpiece during a very colourful period of saxophone history. Everybody played one. Until, of course, its younger brother arrived. Hi there, Matthew Cha, aka Disco Volante here, and today I wanted to take a minute to talk about what I think is the most legendary tenor mouthpiece ever. Guardala fanboy comment incoming in 3, 2, 1, look. I know there are other mouthpieces that have made a big splash in the saxophone world. Maybe someday I'll even do a video on them. But, in my opinion, these two mouthpieces are the ones that basically made solo saxophone a thing. Think about it. No one had really heard all the different colours a tenor could express before Coleman Hawkins. Who played one of these? I'm going to start out with the original New York Tone Master. I haven't got the original ligature, but that's okay because it's kind of horrible anyway. Instead, I'm using a Theo Wani plate ligature, very similar to the original design, so it should give us something pretty close to as if it was stock. Now, if you have ever played a modern Otto Link, you might be expecting something dark, smoky, maybe even a little dull. Not so with this piece. This piece has a tone like Absinthe. It is so bright, despite it having the same low rollover baffle and large chamber that even modern Otto Links share. I think this also pretty reliably puts to bed the myth that Coltrane put a baffle in his Tone Master. It's plenty bright on its own, really, and I think a lot of it comes down to the facing. This is a 5-star mouthpiece, and I'm using a 4-reed on it. Pretty extreme setup by most conventional standards, but I think that really reedy, hard-edged tone has a lot to do with the small tip opening and whatever facing curve these older Otto Links have. My favourite thing about this mouthpiece is how fast it is. Even when you play it very quickly, you never lose the definition of each note. You never really lose clarity. What of its successor, though, the Super Tone Master? Well, if you thought the New York Tone Master was popular, well, the Super Tone Master was just about ubiquitous. I keep saying New York Tone Master because there are two distinct periods to Otto Link's history, the first of which is based in New York. That's where he created mouthpieces like the Slant Signature Hard Rubber and the Tone Master. He later moved his workshop to Florida, Pompano Beach, if I'm not mistaken. And it was in this workshop that he perfected the design of the Super Tone Master. Now, there are several different versions of this mouthpiece, and actually one change of company ownership during this period, all of which is very well documented online, so I won't get too much into it here. But what I will do, instead, is play this. To my constant surprise, the Super Tone Master is actually quite a bit darker than the New York Tone Master. The Super Tone Master, or STM, has a much higher baffle than the New York Tone Master, so it does have a bit more resistance, but it also has a bit more edge and a bit more body to the sound. It's like it takes the Absinthe core of the New York Tone Master and dilutes it a bit with a small amount of honey. Which is not to say you can't take the STM to that really reedy, edgy place where the New York Tone Master lives. You can. in general, I find it to be a more flexible, more dynamic mouthpiece. A fitting name then, Super Tone Master. Like I mentioned earlier, there were 3 main versions of this being the middle one. In my experience, this second version, known as the USA, due to the USA stamp here on the shank, tends to be brighter than the earlier No USA counterpart, but not quite as bright as the JJ Babbitt version to come later. That's the model that's still in production today, and to be perfectly honest, I don't think I could consistently identify what they sound like. Like, seriously, tangentially related, I bet I could take 5 new Otto Link mouthpieces and line them all up and play them one by one, and each one would sound completely different. There were also 3 versions of the original Tone Master. This is a differentiation not a lot of people know about, but you can make it based on 2 things. The serial number, and the length of the band from here to here. Now, I've owned all 3 versions, and the earliest version is a very different mouthpiece from the later 2. The original model is very dark, very round and warm, like you might think of early Coleman Hawkins or Ben Webster. It reminds me much more of the preceding model, the 4-star Master Link. The later 2 models, and especially this last one, which I believe they called the Improved Tone Master, they became substantially brighter and edgier, much more reedy and focused, as we hear with this one. What's important to keep in mind is, at a 5-star tip opening, this is pretty much the biggest mouthpiece they made. What I see with a lot of these vintage links that people end up not liking so much is, people will get them and then they'll open it up to a modern facing like an 8 or a 9, and it takes away a lot of the edge and a lot of the core to the sound that they have in these original facings. When it came to the STM, Otto Link did begin to make larger tip openings, 8, 9, and in some cases even 10. And as such, I think the design of the Super Tone Master is generally more accommodating to being opened up. But if you happen to come across one of these beautiful mouthpieces, don't modify it, it's supposed to be like this. Just use a harder reed. Now, obviously, changing our mouthpiece around can only do so much for our sound, but I do think different mouthpieces gravitate naturally to different palettes of colours to work with, and they certainly make me think differently when I'm playing them. So if you love the sound of a vintage Link, it's tough to go wrong with either of these. The original New York Tone Master, in my experience, is a little bit more direct and a bit more focused, whereas the later Super Tone Masters are a bit fatter, a bit more spread, and a little bit more dynamic. It's really quite mind-boggling to consider how much tenor saxophone tone was built on these 2 mouthpieces. Until, of course, Michael Brecker. But we'll get to him. So I hope you enjoyed my quick spot on what I think is the most legendary tenor mouthpiece ever, the Otto Link. Another conversation made possible by the work of Black American musicians, and another compelling reason why Black Lives Matter. Don't forget to join me over on my Twitch channel at some point, and do subscribe if you loved the video, or if you're a Guardala fanboy. I'm one too. That's all for this time, guys. Cheers.